So, guys, I do want to talk about the Joker film. Film do if I'm saying it correctly, but this definitely was a horrible film, but not as horrible as The Crow. And there's a lot of critics talking about this film and talking just about how bad it is, and it's definitely warranted. And to quote Joaquin Phoenix, "You get what you fucking deserve." And what I mean by that was that when I went to the theater in Wyoming, I was actually the only person in the theater. Not because Wyoming is the least populated state, it was just because it did not deserve a big audience. Just like All Elite Wrestling, when it comes to not being able to fill up their shows all the way because of the quality. So I do want to dissect this film, and I'll talk about some of the issues with it along the way. That and spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. So the film opens up with a cartoon that's a spoof of Looney Tunes, and then I get a little confused with this because I think that what a lot of people are hoping for is this really Academy Award level nominated for Best Picture type of work. And it's really, really not in that ballpark. You open with a cartoon of possibly what happened after um, Archer Fleck shoots Murray on the Murray Show. He's in the dressing room and he's singing a song called Dancing with My Shadow. And in the cartoon, it's like the shadow of him takes his place and goes on stage. And then he goes on stage. And then they have this thing where you see the cops just do this stupid march from from outside the show to into the show. And then also too, like as I said, it's supposed to be a spoof of Looney Tune cartoons. And I just think that it's like what I've said, that I think the point of it is that the first thing is that it didn't captivate me. It was different. It threw me off. And I think that one big issue with this film is that it was very artistic. Like it was a mix of a musical and it was a mix of just, different vignettes or segments. Like it's trying to confuse you because I think with the Joker film, one thing that they're trying to do with you is that they're trying to make it like an unreliable narrator. So it's like, you're seeing the world through you're seeing it through Arthur Fleck's perspective, and obviously he has mental health issues. So you're not seeing it. You're seeing a story that may have some things in it that don't feel that don't feel linear. You cut away to dance numbers, you cut away to animation, you do all that because obviously he has an unstable mind. I think a great example of that is two films, Pink Floyd The Wall, where it is a narrative of this person who is a rock star with deep mental health issues, and all the animations and everything is kind of like in his head to deal with the traumatic fact that his father um, died and wasn't able to be raised by his father, but then also um, living the lifestyle of a rock star where, it's feeling used, it's being isolated and lonely. So in Pink Floyd The Wall, they capture that with the animations and just all the surrealist images to show that, the person has an unstable mind. A better example is Memento, because obviously the character has short-term memory issues. So that does it very well. But in here, I get it, but it doesn't all like come together in a conclusion where I feel like, as a watcher of the film, I feel like it was a good film. I felt like it was very pretentious, real. Like obviously, you open with a silly cartoon. It makes me feel like I'm watching something like the Simpsons movie where you're spoofing other television shows or other animation styles or other films, really, because in Hollywood they like that when people do tributes to other pieces of work, but there's ways to do that. It's a lot better. Obviously, they ripped off the Looney Tunes, and it didn't really work, really. And then the next thing is that it takes place at Arkham Asylum, like a majority of the film, and we're seeing like the aftermath, which is that there's a case on Arthur Fleck, whether or not he is going to stand trial for the crimes. Either he killed 5 people. It turns out he confesses to killing his mother, so now 6 people. And the argument is whether or not he is, if he did that and for reasons, if he needs to be put in a psychiatric ward for reasons of insanity, or he needs to actually face the death penalty because Harvey Dent and other people think that he actually did it out of a conscious mind, really. So it does bring up a couple of important things to talk about. I think that in the Arkham Asylum, there are a lot of police officers in there that do things to him, like it looks like at the end of the film, because I want to mention now in case I forget, it looks like they strip him down and he's laying on the ground, really, and then he kind of looks very traumatized. So it almost implies that he may have been sexually assaulted. And then the other thing too is that they give him cigarettes for telling jokes, or they give him cigarettes for singing and other things like that. So it's very, very clear that obviously he has a very low social IQ. So it's not that they're friends with him; they just kind of see him as a piece of entertainment, really. And he goes along with it because I think that he's mentally unstable, or he may feel like that's a societal role. And as somebody who has mental health issues, and I used to be really naive and have low self-esteem, I can resonate with that there are people who treat people who are socially off as pieces of entertainment. And you look at Arthur Fleck's character, and he comes from deep trauma and psychological abuse. And I've had that same situation as well, really, but not to the level of Arthur Fleck, but to a point where it's impacted my social skills and my social development. And instead of people being caring and compassionate, people respond to that with, treating me like a joke the same way they treat him like a joke. So, that's one of the themes. I think the other theme is also that this takes place in the 1980s, I believe. So still like in psychiatric wards, it was generally not about rehabilitation. It was about more so holding people. So you did see a lot of situations where these guards are not psychologically trained. It's ultimately the best way to deal with prisoners to beat their ass, really, and that was or criminally insane persons to beat their ass, just like in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That was very common back in those days, really. So I think it was very thematic of just how there's more understanding of mental health issues nowadays. There's still long ways to go, really. But back then, people believed in abuse and manipulating people or treating people poorly. And I would also say that also at the Arkham Asylum, you kind of see that these inmates also are in a real jail, or there is jail politics. Like when you meet Lee, who is supposed to be Harley Quinn, she actually pays one of the guards to be able to see the Joker, Arthur, and they have sex. And then also another time, it's revealed that she committed herself and other things like that. So there's ways for her to get what she wanted. And then also did a lot of smoking in the prison. So she was able to burn down part of the asylum and all that. And, it was a little unrealistic when she did that in the film, because obviously in a real asylum, they're doing an investigation, they would do preventive measures and all that. But I can imagine in the 80s, they were not about that. Like I work in a hospital, and psychiatric hospital. Usually after every incident, they have to think about preventive measures. Like I remember one time there was a patient that was manipulating another patient, and the patient that got manipulated just had a violent outburst, and that patient ended up being arrested. So they did something where they took that patient who was very manipulative and they put that person in a single room, so that patient would be able to manipulate people and other things like that. So that's what happens nowadays. But back then, there wasn't that much of a care about preventive measures. And I also think that another big theme about this whole film is how we treat criminals and how we portray mentally ill people. I think that a lot of times when you see Arthur in jail And also in the psych ward, people are cheering him and people are laughing at his jokes, or they see him in multiple ways. I think they see him as a mentally ill person to make fun of, just like in Rain Man or Flowers for Algernon with Charlie Gordon, like he's a mentally ill person to make fun of. And I like that because of some of the mental health issues. That's how some people will treat you. They'll treat you like you're stupid. You're their retarded clown. Really, people can be like that. 40-hour film project in New Haven, Connecticut. I was treated like that in the New Haven film community, so that's kind of what that's a nod to. And also that competition where I dealt with discrimination and other things like that. But also too, outside of that, there's also a sense of looking at Arthur as a martyr because people kind of see this Joker character almost like Adolf Hitler in the sense that some people see him as larger than life or like a really, really big deal. So there are people who kind of create a mythology around people like that and say he's a martyr when he's actually not really a good person, really. And I think another theme that I like in this film is what happens at the end. Like, I think one thing I like about this film is that the Joker realizes that Arthur Fleck realizes that all the 6 murders he did was just him, really, and that's important because we live in a society where, honestly, there is criminal insanity, but the problem is that we have to hold mentally ill people and criminally insane people accountable for their actions, because if not, then we live in a world that mentally ill people are allowed to do whatever they want, really. Like, I was looking at the story last night on the news with this girl who had Rett syndrome, where it's like she has mental retardation, and she's 8 years old. No, she's 30 years old with the body of an 8-year-old. And the story about her is that her stepfather was raping her gratuitously, and her stepfather said, the reason why he sexually assaulted her was because he had very high testosterone. He was taking testosterone pills. So he's obviously a predator, because that's one thing a sexual predator does. It's make excuses for their behavior. But he can play maybe I was on drugs, or maybe I was born with a high testosterone, my mental health issues. He deserves to be taken outside and executed for what he did, really, or get castrated and put back into jail for the rest of his life, really. Because to say, he has a mental illness, put him in the psych ward, that's not the right amount of justice, And then also that girl who was sexually assaulted, she had seizures, and she had a short lifespan, but obviously this accelerated her short lifespan. So that's an example of a very, very horrible crime in real life. And then also look at this film where the Joker, and I'm proud that he has that character development where he realizes that, it doesn't matter if you have multiple personality syndrome or you have a mental breakdown, there is right and there is wrong. And we do live in a society where I do feel that, honestly, being around people with mental health issues, you have to hold people accountable for their behavior, or else you're going to live in this world of mentally ill people get weaseled out of trouble, really, their entire lives. And then that creates more like sociopathic people. As someone with mental health issues and misdiagnosed with autism, there are many times in my life where I've done some very like egregious things and offensive things when I was in high school. But I remember my parents always playing the autism card to get me out of trouble. And instead of saying like, okay, you've been through some traumatic things, but because you've gone through some traumatic things, you still got to be held accountable. You still got to be suspended or deal with these consequences. So, I like those as themes. But also through the film, they kind of did something where they would cut away to the Joker and Harley Quinn just having a bunch of song numbers. Like they would cut to like this elaborate set, really, and it would just feel like it would just really feel like, I think they're probably thinking like, okay, Lady Gaga is a musician. Let's kind of throw all these things in just to deal with the fact that she's a musician. But it really felt unnecessary. It really, really felt unnecessary. And I also felt that that sometimes you had like the prisoners start singing like these dance numbers and these jazz songs from the 1930s. Um, and it's almost like, again, it didn't feel realistic. It didn't feel um, like it was motivated. And I also felt they didn't do a good job of just saying that, okay, this is in the Joker's head and maybe he's imagining all these things. And I think that sometimes when you have a storyline where a character has mental health issues and they're imagining all these musical things and other things like that, you have to kind of make it make sense. And they really didn't think about that. They could have had some scene where maybe the Joker is using music and other things like that to kind of show that he had that maybe that was a coping mechanism, but that was never really established. The other thing that happened in the film was that there's this woman that the Joker sees in the first film, like she's African American, I believe. And what happens is that a lot of people saw the first movie and thought that she was like a character in his imagination, but it's later revealed that he may have had a sexual fantasy of her, and the second film tells you that she actually was creeped out by him and he had a bunch of harassing type of behavior. So it's very clear that through like those dialogues that she was actually she actually felt very uncomfortable around him. And then when you see the first film, it's very clear that obviously he was imagining like this situation of her. So I do think that through the film, I think one of the biggest weaknesses is that they overly rely on it being ambiguous or going off in different directions and interjecting musical numbers or singing on stage and other things like that. And it just doesn't feel like it translates well. It just feels very much like a clusterfuck. The next thing that I will say, but also I'm happy to explain that because I was very interested. But I also liked the scene. I think this was the best acting that they did, which was, sorry, my phone just showed me like 20% power. But the next scene that they did was that I really liked. I think the best acting in the film was they actually showed a woman talking about his mother, and it was revealed that his mother like told him that told Arthur when he was 8 years old that he was he was sent on Earth to make everybody laugh and sing and all that, and just put a good in the world. And then she was later told that his mother said, what, that was stupid, and it was really stupid they based his whole life around it. And that really hurt me deeply, and it kind of shows like what people are overlooking is that most people don't really see that Arthur don't care that Arthur's mother was sexually abusive and emotionally abusive and physically abusive to him, and she was really a very, very manipulative personality, really. So it's also kind of like what we see with gender roles. If a woman or if a mother is sexually abusive, physically abusive, or emotionally abusive, most people overlook that. Or you may have narcissistic parents or narcissistic people who will gaslight and know how to make themselves look like the good people when they're actually very despicable people. And I've dealt with people like that in my life. I know I talked about the 48-hour film project, but I know that there was a situation where I was dealing with racism in the competition, and I was also dealing with a city producer who was bullying me, instigating me, harassing me. And when I shared a personal story on stage at a question and answer event saying that my films were inspired by a time in life with struggle with suicide and depression, she was like chuckling, snickering, making sarcastic gasping sounds, laughing up, instigating me so I would make myself look bad. And I remember reporting that, and she did whatever she could to say that I just spoke inappropriately. My issue is that how they pick awards, and that also nothing bad happened, and I'm basically a sore loser. So same situation of a very manipulative and manipulative personality, and some people just live their lives like that. Or I remember, you know what, when I was a kid, um, we moved over like 12 times as a kid, and then my dad said something like, "Oh no, you moved 3 or 4 times." I remember one summer we moved from, and we moved to Albany. No, we moved to from Albany to New York City. We moved to another house in New York City. Then we moved to New Jersey. Then we moved to Connecticut, and then we moved to another house in Connecticut. So that was like six. But my dad said no. When you move multiple times in a city, it counts as one move. Or I remember my dad would force me to go walk 6 miles into town to get a big jug of milk because he would be gulping it like with a big smile and be like, you're going to go get milk and whatever. You're going to go walk 6 miles. And that stopped because people were reporting that, and some people called Child Protective Services on my father. And then they were like, how can you just not pick up milk after work, really? And then also I remember another time as a kid, um, I spanked my younger brother because he was doing a bunch of bad behavior, and my father was saying something like, "This is why teenagers can't be parents." When my brother was saying the word "fuck," he was running out of the house. He was hitting people, and my father just, not always lay down the law with him. But when I spanked the hell out of my younger brother, he actually understood. You know what? You don't disrespect people, and you don't treat people like you can do whatever you want, really. But my father just gaslighted and said, "Oh no, I'm a teenager, and this is why teenagers should not be having kids." When that has nothing to do with it. He's in his 40s and he can't discipline a out of control 5-year-old. But I've dealt with that in many situations in my life where there are people who are very manipulative, or they're going to gaslight or believe their own philosophies or come off as nice people when they are actually very hurtful to others. And that's very painful. So when I saw Arthur's face just like filled with rage and all that, really, and just being revealed that there's lies and gaslighting, it's very painful. And there's people who have mental health issues who are more vulnerable, who deal with that a lot more. It's a very painful thing, but I'm happy that this film really talked about all that. But overall, it was just a very convoluted mess. At the end of the film, he gets stabbed at Arkham Asylum, and it's by this character that they were setting up as possibly homosexual. And it comes out of nowhere, really. So I was thinking to myself, is this guy who actually stabs him, is he actually the real Joker? And maybe Arthur Fleck isn't the Joker. Because, sometimes it happens in movies where they try to twist you like that, but I felt like really unnecessary. It felt like a minor character becoming the main character. Or when you do that in films where you have a minor character taking out a major character, it really just doesn't translate well with the audience. And then at the end of the film, during the courthouse scene, what happens is that there's a bomb that goes off, and the Joker escapes, and then the Joker actually goes back to Arkham Asylum, and that's a weird one because if there were guilty verdicts read out, wouldn't he be sent to the electric chair, being put on death penalty? But sending back to the asylum felt like a little like breaking physics. But yeah, I felt like it was a big mess, really. I think that this film was really marketed as a sequel, just like the Crow films. The first one was great, so people may have an intrigue in seeing the other one. I think this film is definitely a very convoluted mess. It's definitely a very god-awful movie. I really think that it was one of those films that I really feel like the writer, who was also the director of this film, he had a bunch of ideas. He was kind of high off the fact that he was nominated, I think, for over 12 awards. The 12 Oscars was nominated. The first film was nominated for. He almost won Best Picture, but you know how it is in Hollywood. Superhero films are low class, so they don't allow superhero films to win Best Picture because Hollywood is bullshit like that. But he probably just got really high on his own ideas, and he made this piece of crap, really. So it's unfortunate, but I also feel that the other thing too is that he had Lady Gaga on there, so I think that he wanted to throw in a bunch of dance numbers and everything like that to make her happy. And I also think the other part of it, this film was that the Joker's an unreliable narrator because he's psychologically disturbed. So sometimes filmmakers will get lazy and they'll say, okay, well, the film is not supposed to make sense, or it's like abstract art, really, where you have to watch it a bunch of times, go to the theaters a bunch of times to figure it out and everything like that. And that's not good storytelling. It's a convoluted mess. It's a clusterfuck of a film, and that's all I gotta say about it. If you're gonna make if you're gonna make a film with an unreliable narrator, you have to put a lot of things in that film to make it make sense, and then go on to those tangents, just like in the first film. And I think in the first film there may have been one or two scenes that may have felt like it was a little off, or the narrator's unreliable, but everything else was like a linear story. But here they kind of do it way too much, really. And sometimes when you feature things like musicals and dance numbers, you can't say, oh, well, the Joker is an unreliable narrator, he's into music, and that's all the stuff that he's imagining. No, it's just poor writing. It's just, I want to put this in there for this reason or that reason. I like neon lights, and if I was a filmmaker in Hollywood, I would love to do a bunch of have a bunch of neon lights and neon colors and everything like that. But I would not do something like just have like a scene go from like normal to neon for no reason. I am a fan of Japanese anime, so I would not do something like I would try to like have some scenes as a Japanese anime if it's not going to work. I may say, okay, well, maybe the character imagines himself as a cartoon character, and then I could put that in there, and that'd be that, really. But I would establish it a lot better, so it doesn't feel like I'm trying to be creative without a purpose. I used to have this friend in Connecticut. He's a fucking asshole. I'm very user and manipulative people, but I kind of said I wish he was actually working on this film, because he would have told them, you know what, we need to take this script and we need to better it, because there was a lot of problems with it. It was very bad writing. It was meant to be abstract and confusing, but done in a way where I think they felt lazy with the writing, instead of just working harder to say, okay, this is where we want to go, but we need to do more to contextualize it and make it a lot better. You can't just say, well, the Joker thinks in a very abstract way, and we're filming in an abstract way, and we got to make it all make sense, really, because you create a clusterfuck that creates something where you only got one person in Wyoming watching this. And it started when you opened it with like fucking animation, because you wanted to pay tribute to the Disney Channel, like pay tribute to Looney Tunes. Like, honestly, when I watched this film, it really was like, it was almost like the Joker meets La La Land, almost.